Let's find common ground. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Florian Glatz, and today I'm talking to Darri Ulfsson, the founder of Darkblock. Welcome, Darri. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Cool. Darri, I know we have a lot to talk about. I want to talk extensively about what you're building with Darkblock because it's just such a fascinating application in the Web3 space. But before we dive into this, I want to ask you, how did you get into Web3?
Let me see. I think some podcasts, maybe 2016 about Bitcoin piqued my interest. And then I was in Berlin then, and I was running a small design agency with my friends. I was like, hey, we're doing like UX, UI, product design. And we're like, hey, there must be something here. This is so new. Everybody talks about it being so clunky. We must be able to kind of create a niche and do something. And we didn't, of course, end up doing that. We just ended up maybe I bought a little, and then I bought some more, and then I was like, riding the whole kind of roller coaster up and down. And then it wasn't until kind of one of our good friends, I won't mention his name, but he pointed me towards the Arweave space. That was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and he was like, hey, check this out. It's like, what do you think about it? And it was interesting. Arweave is such a cool project. This permanent web, and you pay once and it's stored forever. And then, that same friend, he said like, hey, there's a hackathon starting tomorrow. You should join and like just meet some people, see what's going on. And so I kind of dragged my friend Ari, who we're always kind of brainstorming some ideas, startup ideas. And we just jumped in, and that's kind of where we met our co-founders. We kind of exchanged ideas, and then we decided to work on this project. And that was the first project that I kind of worked on in the Web3 space. And that turned into Darkblock. 2 years later, I'm still at it. So that was kind of, how I got to know blockchain and kind of dove in. And obviously, along the way, there was a lot of degenning, and there was like DeFi summer and that whole roller coaster, like my wallet got hacked, like embarrassing ways. Like we all probably have like those stories. So along the way, kind of learned some of those lessons, and then the same kind of with NFTs. And yeah, so now with Darkblock in building infrastructure for NFTs, like I really feel like NFTs have this bad rap at the moment. Everybody started to I feel like we're doing these calls with partners, and then people say NFTs less and less and less. It's more digital collectibles, which I think is probably a good idea in this kind of climate. Seems to be a strategy that kind of works, but that I think that remains to be seen. But yeah, anyway, NFTs, I think they actually will onboard lots of people unknowingly into Web3, and then it's our job to kind of keep them there and kind of deliver value. So yeah, that was kind of maybe the long or short of that version of the answer.
I think it's a great answer because you gave some really interesting hints, which is that actually you bring a designer's perspective to the space. So maybe actually, because I don't think I asked you explicitly, can you introduce yourself in terms of what are you actually on a professional basis? You seem to have a design background. Maybe just tell our listeners a little bit, where you come from and how you look at this whole technology.
So my background's in creative. I started in photography and studied that for 3 years, but never kind of did that professionally, because my thing is kind of like my goal is to ultimately make enough money so that I can just go back to doing art. But it's so hard to be an artist and commercialize it. It's such a fine kind of balancing act to be able to do, and I just wasn't capable of doing it. And so I moved into design, and that's kind of I guess you could say kind of combining commercial and art and creative, and so been doing product design for over a decade. Ran a studio in Berlin, like I said, worked on a bunch of content apps and some kind of big data, infographic, kind of use consumer facing stuff. Always thinking about kind of trying to minimize complexity and make interacting with a digital product be enjoyable or kind of minimizing friction in that sense. And so Web3 is such an interesting space to be working in because there's so much friction everywhere. And it's so interesting when you enter a space and just what things are called creates friction. Just kind of what things are named, it's called a wallet and not, a bank account because, when you're connecting with your wallet now through these extensions, you're basically, and you have to sign something like, why am I signing with my bank account? Like there's full of money and valuables. This seems so crazy. And so just like how things are named, it's a address, not a bank account number or something like that, So these things just straight away, like it makes it so hard to just kind of what are the concepts, basically the base concepts, what are these things that are named differently, and then so it's kind of, this thing is kind of like that thing, in Web 2 or IRL or something like that. And so you start to kind of create these mental models. It's all about creating mental models, so to shortcut, so that you can actually, now kind of the fear and the kind of the fear of the unknown goes away, and you start to be more, you're willing to take a little bit more risk because you feel like you have more control, you're more understanding what's going on. And so, I'm kind of like, I almost forgot what the question was, but designers' kind of perspective on this whole space and coming from creative and coming from being a designer, I think there is at the moment there are a few things going on. I feel like in crypto at the moment we've got obviously all the tokens, basically the money side, and then you've got NFTs where you can basically tokenize anything, and then we have this new thing of kind of identity, which I get common ground is kind of touching that space. And so how do you use blockchain to kind of do these ZK proofs and prove something's true without kind of showing everything? And so there's so much, it could be so useful. It could be so useful. There's so many things that can make a life so much simpler. Just like the other day, I'm moving at the end of the month. I'm leaving this glorious home office I'm in here and going closer to the beach. And I was transferring the money, like the down payment, and I was going to signing the papers, right? And this is just some random PDF that somebody sent me, some dude I met in a room in the apartment. Like, I don't know. Listen, I didn't validate anything. I was like, just kind of like, ooh, does my gut tell me about this person? Are they trustworthy? Like, can I see that you're LinkedIn or something? Just, I'm going to send you money in half an hour. Like, how could I trust that? I was like, I need a ZK proof here that this person can authenticate they are who they are, and straight away there. So so kind of like these. I don't know. Just think about these use cases and when things become useful, because we can get really kind of bogged down in the tech and if you do this to that and all these hypotheticals, but then how do you actually make it useful? So that was kind of. Did I answer the question?
It's such a cool, you totally did. And there's just so much to explore here. Let me just follow this up with one question, which is that Web3 today is in a state where, it's almost like there was already this rebranding from crypto to Web3 to make it a little bit conceptually more accessible, to give people this idea of, okay, it's called Web3 now, so it's happening in my browser. It's sort of like the internet that I know. I feel that is already a form of simplification from, hey, it uses cryptography, which nobody understands what it is. But then, just like you said, there is so much friction today. It's so clunky. Why do I have to sign in with my bank account to use a Web3 application that feels super risky? Because I use the exact same extension for transferring money that I also use for logging in. So am I actually sending funds when I log in? How do I manage this risk as a user? So we've seen it with AI recently, which until very recently has been also this abstract technology that nobody understands. Some people, talking about it maybe in podcasts and saying this is going to be huge. But if you weren't really into it, into the dark art of building models, which they've been doing at Google and other places, you just had nothing to do with AI in a meaningful sense. Now there is ChatGPT, and suddenly everybody uses it. What is the missing piece for crypto and Web3 to have a similar breakthrough moment like our colleagues in the AI field had recently?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think one of the reasons ChatGPT, and it's interesting because we, like you and me and kind of our community, we're obviously kind of neck deep in tech but most people actually don't know what ChatGPT is or what it does, and then you kind of go on a call with them and you screen share and like, look here, like you just see them kind of get mind blown in real time. It's always so funny. But I think that the genius of it is just how simple it is. It's just there's one input field, you write, and the text kind of gets written in front of you, and it's you don't need to understand what's going on under the hood. It's just magical and super easy. And so Midjourney is interesting in the way that they kind of bootstrapped Discord and can have everything in there. So they just use an interface that is already familiar, and there's lots of people there. So that was kind of an interesting strategy, I thought. But for us, we are actually kind of thinking about that question a lot right now. So we kind of rearranged a few items on our roadmap this year to actually address. After East Denver, we kind of came back and we'd had some talks with a few smart people, and we kind of just looked at each other and we're like, we need to stop being purists and actually just be comfortable with being Web 2.5 in some places. Like when you're building a decentralized protocol, like for it to have value, it needs to fulfill certain requirements and check some boxes. But then to onboard users, it's different. Like some of them will care about that, others won't. And so it's that balancing act I was talking about earlier, is we need to be kind of, we have this thing, and we saw it, someone used that, we were like, oh, let's use that as a phrase, kind of adequately decentralized or decentralized enough, and then being progressive in getting more and more and being transparent with that kind of trait for those who care about it, and then for those who don't yet, they can at least kind of look back and see like, oh, okay, like they're here, like you see the kind of the history and how they kind of were working towards this thing. This is like this admirable whatever. But then in the short to midterm, we need to become more Web 2.5, and so we are now just looking at ways of like also kind of the problem with the wallet. It's such a blocker signing with your bank account. So we are we're trying to find ways to delegate, basically kind of control of it, give delegation to another empty wallet or to a decentralized ID. That would be ideal. Like just like you sign in with your Google account or your Facebook account, or sign in with Apple on all these apps. I want to be able to do something similar, if not exactly that. So maybe just delegate then control. If I trust Google right now, I trust Apple, why wouldn't I then delegate to them potentially signing, authority? So leverage these entities that are out there and are trusted, and albeit centralized, and but then as a stepping stone to then get to, okay, then can I then at some point move that then delegation to a decentralized ID, something that I use, can be my ID on the internet, but isn't like, can't empty my bank account.
It's interesting. I want to jump on what you said with becoming more Web 2.5 than puristic Web 3. I think many people have this insight right now. at Common Ground, we use this phrase terminology a lot as well, because I mean, Common Ground itself is not a purely decentralized app, right? It's nothing for purists. Our application stack very much resembles that of something like Discord, which we originally, set out to replace. And the sort of decentralized elements or the Web3 elements are really just add-ons, and they become frictionlessly usable because we start on a Web2 foundation, right? If you start on a Web3 foundation, you will always struggle with, well, how do I bring my users now to this point where they can start using this app? And so I appreciate your sort of perspective as a designer, sort of validating also that this is not the place to get, the next billion users into this system. We need to go where they are, and they are firmly in the Web 2. And they, as you said, don't have a problem trusting in big intermediaries like Google, Apple, and so on, right? They don't fight this same fight as we do, it seems. And so it's really about bringing the benefits of Web 3 to Web 2 users, and Web 2.5 is a nice way to say this. And funny enough, now we've been building Common Ground pretty much in the open for about a year now, and many people had a chance to check it out, see how it works, what is Web 3, what is Web 2. And just in the last 2 months, we've seen a bunch of, let's say, competitors. We don't really look at them this way, but other companies also building Web3 social apps. We've seen them launch, and there are big founders behind them. Even the guy who founded Tinder, for example, now is launching a Web3 social network. And just seeing how they package the narrative, how they bring this idea of NFTs, collectibles, of wallets, Web3 identities, of ownership, right? User-owned platforms, and so on, into the mainstream is really interesting. And we definitely can learn a lot from them now. Just seeing actually, how does someone with zero ideological buy-in into this whole space actually take the tools that have been built and deliver them to an audience that is ready for it, right? In principle. So I'm endlessly fascinated by this sort of evolution. And I think even rebranding crypto to Web3 sort of had this element of saying, okay, Web3 is a little bit like crypto, but without a lot of the dogmatism around, what it has to be in order to be good enough, right? And I think we've also seen it with something like Farcaster, which is this sort of decentralized Twitter. They call themselves sufficiently decentralized.
Right.
So they use that terminology. So I think many people are coming from different directions to exactly the point that you just described. Let's talk about the evolution of the web just for a moment, because we're pretty much the same age. I don't know exactly how old you are, but I feel we're both, firmly in our 30s, inching towards our 40s. So we've had, some glimpses of the early web. I remember I got online when I was 12 years old. So there was around the 2000 area. Facebook was not a thing back then. I was on IRC and those kinds of things. I remember publishing a website back then was a major undertaking. I did enjoy it. I built my first website in Microsoft Word. Funny enough, you could export as HTML.
Amazing.
And so there's this saga in the Web3 space that says Web 1 was read only, like you could really publish yourself. Web 2 was read and write, and now Web 3 is read, write, and own. How is sort of your perspective on the internet and how it changed over the years, and maybe sort of highlighting, the deficiencies of it? Why are we even in a place where we want to bring a Web 3 to the world? What's the problem in the first place? How did you see the web evolve, and what motivates you to say, okay, I actually want to help move from 2 to 3?
Well, first of all, thank you for assuming that I'm in my 30s. I'm actually 43, so I'm super
Dude,
warm
really?
inside now. Like you made me feel so good. But so that means that when you were 12 years old on IRC, I was like maybe 16 or something. So I remember being in high school and we were like, everybody's in the computer room and like, hey, like we're in this room. So yeah, I remember those days. And yeah, I mean, I feel like personally, like I consider myself a technologist. I'm not that smart. I don't always dig really deep into the tech. I don't really know how to write code. Um, but I do like using it, and I do like thinking about what this could be used for, and like because I'm like by nature I'm a glass half full type of person, and so I always see the potential. I always see what can be, and so I think I approach that makes me kind of by naturally be always kind of attracted to the new shiny thing because I have like this new and that's like possibilities, new things you can do with it, and I'll play around with it, and you know I won't go so far as kind of like reverse engineering it or kind of doing an Elon Musk on it or whatever, but I do like to play with it, and so I'll be like if there's a new social platform, a new app, like I'm downloading it, I'm in there like using it. Like I 2000, what was it? I don't know, 2007 or 8. I told my mom like, yeah, you have to check out Facebook, you know, and I think and a few years later she was in there, and I was like, oh, you have to get off Facebook. No, it's toxic. And then I was like, it was on to the next thing, and so I think like the danger of kind of my kind of blasé attitude towards I think technology is that I will, and I think it's kind of same with just people. I will always see the best in it, and I'll overlook maybe the treacherous parts or the potential for it to kind of go wrong. And I think like that's kind of with social media that was happened to me. I think to a lot of us, you just like this is gonna solve so many problems, and he's like, oh, this is actually like fuels just hate and vitriol, and people have these. We all have these kind of you kind of snap, you're frustrated, and then there's such an easy outlet to write something in anger, and not see the human response of the person on the other end, and so it has these unforeseen consequences, and there's definitely going to be something like that with Web3 as well, just like with any kind of technology, any kind of tool, you can hammer a nail, you could hit someone in the head with it. So, the evolution of the internet, I think, is just, I thought probably just like similar to any kind of revolutionary tech that gets kind of born, except like this kind of technology is just, and every year it kind of gets faster and faster and faster. Now with the AI, it's just, whew, it's like it seems like it's been around for months, but it's on maybe ChatGPT's only been alive, I don't know, maybe a few weeks, maybe. So, it seems like it's going faster and faster and faster, and so, what that has an effect has on us, I'm not sure. The internet is just, it's almost like, I think at some point, people won't even have a name for it. Like, what I mean? It's like in a few years, you won't even talk about the internet. It's a similar kind of, I don't, maybe feel like that might be happening with NFTs. It's like you're saying the word because you need to describe it, to distinguish it from something else. And so we use the word internet as a way to talk about communications that happen over broadband or like I'm on the phone. No, I'm just like, it will be so integrated into our lives. You'll just be talking to a person. You won't be on the internet. I'll be talking to you in a hologram or something, and like with in my glasses, and my girlfriend's going to be in another room, and I'm just talking to you, talking to her, not on the internet with you, and then IRL with her. So that might be Web4. It's just when the internet just kind of disappears into the background, and yeah, so it feels like it's just becoming more and more and more integrated into everything, from these clunky machines having to be in a computer room, IRC, into being in your pocket, and then, seamless. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think I see. And then that is just going to change us as humans. we are going to change. We are changing. We're already changing. We're already like our physiology and hormones being constantly in the state of kind of fight and flight, because you can get this thing, everything so fast. Well, you remember like when we didn't have cell phones, just like this, I seem to remember there was more about kind of anxiety was in these longer cycles. Now it's like you have an anxiety attack every 5 minutes almost. So yeah, something like that.
Well put. Yeah. I can see it. And I love your Web4 reference. I'm in touch with a bunch of people who think a lot about what Web4 could be, and it could really be a description of what they are saying. So I think you're absolutely right here in your gut feeling. And I also like that you mentioned this sort of tendency for people to not really look at the downsides of a technological revolution, just think about all the problems it will solve. And then the new problems it creates, you only learn them when you're firmly invested in this new paradigm and you see it actually unfold across a planet of billions of people, right? I think nobody thought that Facebook would be such a toxic sort of thing when it started out. I remember also joining 2007, and I also thought this is genius. And now I don't use it at all anymore, but obviously we use its offsprings.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm a kind of a. I think it's good that social media exists. I think that the internet is amazing. I actually think there's nothing, we couldn't have done anything differently. We are just, as creatures, we're drawn to the light, and we just have to deal with it and move on and try and build the next solution. Just keep innovating ourselves out of it.
100%. I mean, in building common ground, I sometimes think we're building, Facebook 2.0 or 2.0 almost, right? Because it's really, I think Facebook developed a lot of patterns that actually make sense, like this ability to connect with people, to digitize relationships, this idea of groups, right? So the ability to find other people that have similar interests. But then in need for a business model and in need for driving up revenues, all this toxicity came along. They realized, okay, we can harvest people's data and so on. And so what we're really doing differently at Common Ground is really changing the business model side of it. We'd never want to be in a place where we need to harvest people's data, right? So it's not the application that's fundamentally wrong, it's the business model behind it and this misalignment of interest between the people running the platform and the people using the platform. And I think this is also an element to Web3. It's just how is it monetized and how is it operated, right? You mentioned NFTs actually again, saying as well, today we call it NFT because we need to differentiate it from just a JPEG, just some digital art on the internet. Well, if it's an NFT, it means it is actually more than that. It sort of has this digital twin as a token on a blockchain. There is some provenance connected to it. There is some sort of authorship connected with it. There is value connected with it. This is an image you can sell on a marketplace and all these things. And in the future, we may not say NFT anymore. Any picture we encounter probably is an NFT, right? That's a really powerful idea. I have this question in my mind that I want to ask you, which is that what initially, fascinated you about NFTs? Was it your artist's heart, seeing how, well, I can see other artists that make money suddenly with digital art, that is something I want to explore? Or what was the avenue that led you to sort of realize that NFTs are something you want to invest a major amount of your life and energy into? How did that happen?
I think I'm trying to think back kind of what it was, and I just remember this one use case which I think it's been executed. Don't know at what scale, but I just remember my brother was asking me about like, where is your like the document that proves that I own my apartment back in Iceland, and where are the documents where I can see like where can I see exactly the loan that I took like 20 years ago, like how can I have overview? Where's it logged? Where does stuff? Where's it stored? And I was like wondering about this, a house being tokenized on chain, and then being able to see everything. Just go on the block explorer, and I could just see, here it is. This is when it was minted. Here's the provenance. Here are all the documents attached to it on chain. I can see all the metadata. I can see all the transactions. I can see the previous owners. It's like a log, and it's there. It's public. It's accessible. And I was just like, anything that's owned by anyone that needs to be tradable just should be like this. It doesn't have to be not even just digital stuff. Just anything. If I'm going to sell something, and just be able to do that. On chain, it just feels like, also for someone like me who could just like, I'll be losing my keys, and there's like having it on chain. It's like, oh, fuck it, I know I'll never lose it, or like that's at least the blockchain dream, right? It should be permanent. So just feel like the blockchain is such a good solution for, keeping data reliable and ownership clear. And so it's a bit scary. You can understand like you can't like undo the things and stuff like that. So, but that's what the ecosystem is about. It's about creating these kind of tools around it to make it more kind of easier to use. And so I've got social recovery with wallets now and stuff like that. So it's like all these new ideas that kind of come to solve those problems. But I just remember this thing about the kind of the house and that and then the deed being on chain, and me personally being able to find my own stuff. So NFTs is just, whatever it's tokenizing, whether it's a JPEG or a house, I feel like it's just so useful. And so, I mean, maybe everything shouldn't be a token, but it's tokenized, but it's really useful. If you can do so many things with it that you couldn't before. And so I think like that will be the thing that we, like with NFTs at least, how do you onboard? Like that's the question that the $1 billion question that we're all trying to answer. How do we onboard people in, crossing the chasm? It needs to be 10x better. They need to be, it's not enough to just make the experience on par with Web2, like we talked about earlier. We need to be able to do things in this space with these new tools like Web3 under the hood that you can't do in Web2. That's how you compete against YouTube and Facebook and Discord, is you can do things that you can't do in Web2, but it's the experience is on par, and you can do this new amazing thing. So that's what kind of blew my mind with NFTs. It's just how useful it can be.
Yeah. It's interesting what you mentioned, that it's actually a real estate sort of use case that made you initially fascinated about the utility of this. I think we're getting there, but it's gonna take a little while actually to manifest, just because, notaries are still involved, at least in many jurisdictions, in these things, and they don't want to lose that business. Obviously, the blockchain is a way better notary, and it's for free, essentially. But it's, at least in Germany, it's quite a fight to
I think these Germans are going to be last to adopt to this, but there's value in off chain for sure. I think the future. I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday on a call, potential one of our partners, and they were saying like the future isn't just permissionless; it's going to be permissionless and permissioned. And so, there's going to be this mix, and kind of figuring out where it's appropriate is kind of be the trick kind of moving forward.
No, 100%. I remember talking about a use case with a bunch of people, which was about inheritance, right? And how do you actually do inheritance in the future with digital assets? And you can find a purely decentralized solution, but you will always have the problem of proof of death. Right? How do you prove that someone is actually dead, such that, the protocol should trigger a transfer of ownership of these assets that are part of the inheritance? And it's one of the insights that we had in brainstorming this is that, well, you can go fully decentralized, and then you need essentially something like a waiting period or a challenge period for a death proof, right? It could be that someone fakes a death proof, but then you have to wait for a year. And within this year, someone, the proclaimed dead person could actually reappear, or, some other kind of counterproof could be fabricated. But then if you have a notary involved, the notary could have this sort of override function that says, okay, I, as a notary, a public notary that, has sworn an oath on the Constitution and that has, all this reputation and business going on, I, as a notary, now vouch for the fact that this person is actually dead. And then you can short circuit the 1 year waiting period to a 2-week period, because there is some actual official trust coming into the game, and you could sort of accelerate the process. So I do fully agree with you that I think we could have a situation, or we will have a situation of sort of mixed models. Now, since you're sort of an aspiring digital artist, although you can't really live that dream at the moment since you're a founder, but I just wanted to get your opinion on this royalties discussion that's currently happening in the NFT space. I don't know if you follow it at all, but a lot of people are very angry because this new marketplace called Blur is sort of turning NFT trading into something that looks very financialized, very much like trading any other commodity or asset. And they are circumventing all these royalty elements of NFTs in order to make it just maximum interesting for sort of day traders. Do you think that NFTs are fundamentally changing? Do you think they will get appeal again? Or is this, where is this all going? And what aspect do royalties play in actually making NFTs attractive in the first place to artists and so on? Because I remember there was a big selling point, right, for NFTs originally.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot to unpack in that question, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it was a big sell, royalties, obviously, and to be honest, like when I learned that they weren't actually enforceable, like they weren't being enforced on chain, it was actually optional by the marketplaces, I was kind of surprised. I didn't do my due diligence there. So, yeah, I learned that like a few years ago, and kind of seeing this unfold, it's like, yeah, of course it's going to happen in a bear market, and you just need to use any tool you have to fight for those not that many users in Web3, to be honest. So these are companies kind of fighting for their lives, and yeah, the promise that the creators had, basically the royalties that they were promised, have kind of been taken away. And so, which I think is like, I'm agnostic to what the strategies of these marketplaces leverage to deliver value to their users. I think NFTs are obviously kind of like we talked about, it's way more than just this or that, just JPEGs. It's way more than that, or it can be way more than that. It will be more than that. I think anything probably that will be tradable will be tokenized because it's just so useful. Maybe added with that kind of added notary angle, maybe some kind of Oracle kind of angle on it. But I think what's happening now with Blur, these kind of royalty wars, is just interesting. It's for those creators that it was kind of their livelihood, or the business model. It's unfortunate. I do think that this is what the royalties part is, one of those features which will onboard people into the space. So I think it was a great feature of NFTs to begin with. It onboarded, I think, got a lot of creators interested in it, and kind of all this promise of a new kind of revenue stream. I think it's fairer. Your art gets sold in the future. Why shouldn't you get royalties of that? It makes perfect sense. So at least at Dark Block, our company, we are actually now focusing on tools to enforce royalty payments. I mean, we can get into that if you want to, but I
want to, man.
Yeah. So basically,
but before we dive into this, 1 second, I want you actually to properly explain Dark Block, just high level, and then let's dive into how you're actually solving this royalties problem. I was suspecting that you're actually working on this, so happy to hear that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Dogblock, at Dogblock, we are building Web3 content infrastructure. We are building a decentralized protocol for unlockable content. And basically, kind of in a nutshell, kind of the user flow is creators can add more content to an NFT on mint or even after it's minted. So right now you have this public IP, the JPEG, the monkey picture, which everyone can see and anyone can right-click save. We looked at that and said, I thought we can do way more here. Find no knock on NFTs and kind of how they were being leveraged and their kind of basic kind of version of how they're born into the world of the internet. But we were thinking, hey, you have this thing, it's on chain, it's proof of ownership. What if you could attach more stuff to it? So if you hold this NFT, you can actually see and access more content than just this one JPEG. We could just take any type of content and attach it to the NFT. And so that's what the protocol does. It's, and I was talking about Arweave in the beginning. In that Arweave hackathon, we built kind of an MVP of this concept and got some money, and they then invested in us when we did our kind of a pre-seed round to build out Darkblock, which basically enables creators to add content. It gets stored on Arweave. It is encrypted by the protocol, military-grade encryption. So we've kind of become this encryption layer on top of Arweave. Because Arweave, anybody can scrape Arweave and download the files and look at them. It's almost like this kind of public Dropbox, decentralized Dropbox. We encrypt the assets, so it doesn't matter if you download it, you can't do anything with it. It's just like a rock. So those assets are mutably tied to the NFT, so that only the owner can then access them. So you sign with your wallet, with your bank account, and if that wallet's if the NFT is in that wallet, you can then access these assets, and they can be any type of asset. We don't care. The protocol doesn't care what kind of digital media it is. So it can be a video file, it can be an image, it can be 3D models, it can be audio files. And so what this basically does is we're trying to solve content in Web3. So you have all these content creators who are in Web2. Some of them are maybe being censored by platforms. Some of them maybe see the promise of the communities in Web3, so they can actually, they're the long tail of the content creators who don't manage to make enough money on Spotify or YouTube from the streams, but they have these 1,000 true fans, which they're just so many. If they could just minimize the middleman, they could get more money. And so they see the promise of Web3, but content doesn't really work that well in Web3 yet. We need more tools. And so that is kind of what we're building. We are building the content infrastructure for Web3 so that, we can leverage NFTs to do much more. So, and that's what we have built right now. And then the next step is the monetization that we build into the protocol. So monetization that's enforced by the protocol, no skipping past that, like the royalties on the marketplace. And so creators can actually not just have to sell an NFT to give access to the content, they can rent access. So we created this concept, which is our V1 of monetization, which we call access NFTs. And so these are NFTs that basically become like a clone of the original content NFT that has all the assets attached to it. So you've got the public ID, maybe the poster of the movie, and the movie is encrypted, attached to NFT. Only the owner of the NFT can access it, but now we can actually clone it, create this rentable NFT. So with NFT renting, it's always been the NFT moves to another wallet for a specific amount of time, and then it goes back. We want to just keep the NFT in the wallet. We just create this access NFT model. So that NFT will stay in your wallet like a receipt, but for that time given, you will have access to the actual content. And so that will create a new revenue stream, and something that you can't do at the moment with NFTs. You can do it with token gating, but we see token gating, basically token gating, for those who are not familiar with it, is you have an NFT and then you show up somewhere like on Discord or like on a website, and there's a connect wallet button, and then if you have this NFT, you can go to this walled garden. But we see that as just being, there's a you just switch out the key, like the Web2 password for an NFT. It's not really Web3. We need the content, the walled garden, to be decentralized and Web3. So that's what we're solving. We call it true ownership of the asset. It's not because if you stop paying for your Kindle account, all the ebooks that you thought you owned are gone. If the person who's hosting that website that's being token gated stops paying for their web hosting service, that thing that you thought that NFT was giving you ownership over is gone. But with ours, the content is attached to the NFT and is portable and is permanent. And so you can kind of hear like the Web3 purism kind of coming through there in my talk. And so that's that's what we're now trying to kind of, okay, let's now build this Web3 pure content infrastructure and then make it accessible to all the content creators who are used to Web2 smooth UX.
So I love the problem that you're solving, and I could say so many things about this. I think we had this chat one night where I was sort of telling you a little bit about my sort of touch points with exactly the problem you're solving. But long story short, I think one issue that the purist here has when trying to, bring this to the mass market is that the benefits of this solution will only become apparent, in potentially decades, when exactly what you described has happened, that the resource to which traditional NFTs are pointing to are offline, right? Mm-hmm. And actually the JPEGs that I bought just disappeared, and I probably lost my backups of it, and all I have now is a random token on the blockchain, and I can't even tell you anymore which one was ape number 1 and which one was ape number 2. So I feel that the value proposition in the present day to what you're building is probably more in this monetization ability to actually say, okay, we have a protocol that can enforce royalties. Traditional NFTs, the ERC 721 standard, just has no conception of royalties in it, right? And this is why marketplaces also don't have to follow it, right? It's just sort of an off-chain or sort of additional element to the NFT that's not core to it. And so a marketplace can just be like, well, today I'm not gonna enforce royalties and tomorrow I do. And what seems to be the case is that you're developing a much more integrated approach where if you want to sell that NFT, the royalties have to be paid. Maybe you can talk about this a little bit, how you're actually solving this or how your thoughts are in this.
Right. So basically the enforcement of royalties as we know them now on marketplaces. So for us to be able to solve that, our value proposition, it is this additional content that you can add to NFTs, basically making NFT upgradable, right? And so you're adding some utility to the NFT. And so that utility is sometimes, like I said, mentioned, it's delivered to the holders of the NFTs through various means, maybe airdrops, some secret links. You go and you get something. We are saying, hey, if you're going to do that, attach it to the NFT, because then it has permanence. And then if the NFT exchanges hands, that original person will no longer have access to that thing. If they should have access to a thing, then you can just check the box that makes the asset downloadable when you create this darkbook asset. So you can still keep that but if you want the basically the NFT to whoever buys it can get that stuff that you've been that utility that you've been delivering to that NFT or that holder through all these different means. What you can just use something like darkbook and it's attached to it, and so. If that utility that has been added to the NFT is inherent to its value, being like one of the reasons why you're buying the NFT, what the dark web protocol can enforce is you would not have access to these things unless you pay the royalty when you buy the NFT.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
genius. Okay,
and
interesting.
so, and so the royalty enforcement is woven into, well, what utility are you adding to this NFT? Make that then only be usable if you pay the royalty. So that's kind of how we're trying to leverage our solution to help creators with this royalty problem.
I love that. You know, you can be creative with this, right? This could be, for example, a personalized sort of letter by the artist. So you still have the public JPEG and you have no way to enforce a royalty on the sale of the public JPEG. But there could be this, you know, encrypted, personalized letter to the first buyer with a handwritten signature of the artist, sort of digitalized and encrypted. I don't know. There are many ways how you can say, okay, this NFT just isn't as valuable without this encrypted content as it is with it, right? So I think there is a lot of ways to do this. Obviously, you mentioned films. So, of course, the film is probably what's interesting in that case. So that's a given that this works in this case. But even for monkey pictures, I could imagine that, you know, if there is something really personal from the artist, then, and it's contained inside in addition to the picture, that could already make the difference to have people actually pay the royalty, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, there are quite a few projects that have leveraged our tech to deliver comics to their holders. And so, you know, one amazing project, Omega Runner, you know, some of the people on that team are the creators of Hunger Games. And so kind of, you know, these are like smart, talented people, and they're creating this amazing world. And they did this initial drop, PFP drop with these characters from this world. And then they are adding the comic, you know, over time, they're adding the chapters of the comic and dropping it via dark block to the NFT. And so you connect with your wallet with your NFT on their site, you go into the vault, and there you can read the comic. And so that, if you buy it into that world, you are there because it's like it is amazing. Like it's like it's going to be the next Star Wars, I think, or something like that. So if you're just buying it to trade on, speculate, and flip it, you know, I'm not against that at all. Like kind of whatever's going on on the Blur marketplace and similar, you know, I think that's fine. And if you don't want to pay that royalty because you're doing something different, you know, you have a different strategy, I don't really have anything against that per se. But there are so many people who will be engaging with projects because of the content, because of what you get for being part of that community, and they probably would willingly pay the royalty because they want to keep that thing alive. But you know, we can actually enforce it, you know, for those of us who would be cheeky and try and, you know, get away with not doing it. So yeah, so there are projects out there already kind of delivering this type of content. And I see more and more projects pop up. You know, Planosaurus is one of them. Planosaurus is a big project on Solana right now, and they're so smart. They are content creators first and create the project around it. So you I think if you buy it just to flip it, it's just so engaging as a project and what they're doing. You're gonna want to have access to that content. So you're gonna pay that royalty probably happen, even if you're just trading and flipping. So I think it's down to the projects to kind of deliver value, deliver this utility, and then we can hopefully solve this problem.
It's ingenious, I think. It's a really ingenious solution, in particular also to the royalty problem, beyond all the other things that you're also solving with this. What are sort of the use cases that excite you the most at the moment? Obviously, people will come up with things you've never thought about, and they will probably be amazing too. That's the beauty of building infrastructure. But from what you can see right now, what excites you the most?
Well, I'm kind of fresh now. At Doppler this month, March is music month. So we're doing a lot of kind of exploration in that space and doing spaces with artists and that. But in February, we had literary month. And at the end of Literary Month in February, we actually realized Darkbook is being used to power over 30% of ebook platforms in Web3. And we kind of stumbled into that. And so ebooks is just such a good use case because it's just so easy to understand. You know, you wouldn't have the book. Of course, the book's not going to be just open because, you know, no one's going to buy the NFT if they can just read the book. You don't buy it. I mean, sometimes I remember the time when I would put like these smart books out for display, you know, if a girl was coming over that I want to impress. So I would buy the book just for the cover. But most of the time you buy the book because you want to read it. And so, you know,
So nerdy.
It's so nerdy, it's so lame. I know, it's embarrassing.
No, it's cool.
But, you know, so I think ebooks is such a good, it's so easy to understand. And also for people like, it's trying to explain kind of the value of unlockable content. It's like, yeah, okay, the cover's there. The value is what's inside it. You buy an NFT, you get access to it. You know, now with Darkbook, you can do rentable stuff. So you got the library model. You know, you pay for a month's access to the book. You don't necessarily need to buy it. So, whereas and then you own it, and you can sell it again on the market, on the market. Or maybe you buy a limited edition one, has a rare cover, or has some cool images inside it, different than the other one that's kind of less rare. So, ebooks is very interesting for us. It's also very new in Web3. It has I think it has a lot of kind of headroom. It can grow a lot. There's a lot of traction. Writers are coming in. They don't like traditional publishing. There's so much weirdness there. There's so much delay. The publishers can just block ideas. They can just say no, the main character needs to be a girl or needs to be a boy because of reason X, Y, Z, and it's all these weird things where in the Web3 they are just directly in communication with the community, and so this feedback loop is so fast. And so books, I think, are super exciting because the creators are creating it. The communities are super engaged. It's all about the content. It's all about the utility. It's all about world building. So, and you can see how those projects, books becoming computer games, becoming movies, is something that happens again and again and again. And it's going to be like that in Web3 as well. You start with the narrative, with the story, and then the worlds get built. So I'm excited for that because I can see that just becoming so much else. Obviously, music is interesting as well, and movies, amazing. It's just those are all they're so huge. Those markets, those spaces. So there's so many different ways to kind of I guess they got Hollywood down to the indie filmmakers. So there's that. That is very exciting to me as well. Film 3, basically selling NFTs to fund movies. I think that's an amazing tool. I think we're going to see so much cool content and films and movies be made now in the next few years, just because the community is driving it. People get what they want, not what they're told what they should want. So I'm so excited for that.
Interesting. Just a remark on your literary example, a sort of a counterpoint to it that came to my mind when you were explaining it is that a few years ago I talked to someone who's pretty OG also in the crypto space. His name is Simon de la Rouvier. He's a South African guy who I think lives in New York now, and he's been very early in Ethereum. He's been with Consensus really early, and he's been doing a lot of interesting things in the space. And I think he's currently building sort of an agency or company in New York based on the hypothesis, actually, that in fact books, publications, and so on, they actually should be free and freely accessible, because he says, well, as an artist, you have sort of two conflicting interests. On the one hand, you want your art to be accessible as widely as possible, because that's why you make it, right? You want people to be able to enjoy your art. At the same time, you want to make a living off of it, right? So you somehow need a business model. And so the model that he develops is one where the content that he's publishing is completely free, but then he creates these sort of characters like art that refers to things happening in his stories. And this art then is collectibles, so NFTs. And so he wants to find a business model where the content is free, but then the people who really love the story, they can buy the digital collectibles corresponding to the story. Sort of like, I don't know, a Disney movie that is completely free, but you can then buy the Star Wars action figure if you really found the movie so compelling.
Yeah.
So I feel these are two models that are not contrary to one another. I think they are two different models in a sense, ultimately to find a sustainable way of living for creators. But just wanted to share as a sort of counterpoint to the way you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like our mission statement is to give creators more control over how their content is distributed and monetized. And we don't want to dictate how, the business models work in with Web3. We just want to give creators more flexibility. I think NFTs, it bring that straight off the bat. You have this new way to charge for something. And so we just want to give creators new ways to kind of use more tools to leverage, basically. And so if they want to make everything or some of it at free, all that's cool. If they find some way for dark rock and multiple content to be useful for them in their kind of their setup and creating multiple revenue streams. Like now in music market, we've learned that most musicians have like 6, 7, 8 income streams. So just to kind of, be able to keep their head above water. Ultimately I'm happy for if creators want to make the book open and then charge for something else, that's fine. We just want to help them do it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that it's probably a sort of a mixed model, where you have maybe a super popular song which you make free, or a popular book, but then you have also these monetizable side elements to it, and then you have these other maybe less successful books, but those are maybe then hidden in a dark clock.
Yeah.
For people to then unlock for paying royalties, something like this.
Yeah, we talk about the box set a lot of the times, especially like in the context of music and movies. You used to buy this box set, the collect for the super fans.
Yeah,
I think unlockables are like perfect for that. That's basically exactly what they are. You want to pay extra for that extra thing, and so that's what you can do. You can do it. I think Starbucks, they kind of became the masters of like creating these endless tiers of options to pay for. So we are. I think we could be part of that tech stack, enabling like tiering.
I just think you're going to be a really, really important infrastructure going forward. So really, really glad you're building this. It solves a very fundamental problem in the content and creator space, I believe. We're also good above beyond the hour, but I have a last question for you also. That relates to something you also mentioned before, which is censorship. Obviously, when you're building sort of a content sharing protocol of the kind that you do, you will always have, people using it also for illegitimate things. So, can I use this to distribute child abuse, sexual material, or can I use it to sell, I don't know, pirated Hollywood movies and these kinds of things? Is this something that you believe is fundamentally part of this, freedom of Web3, that it's a censorship-resistant infrastructure and it's not the problem of the infrastructure that people do these kinds of things? Or are you actively sort of thinking about this and building means to actually do censor because there are just some things you don't want to support? How do you, where do you fall on this line? It's obviously a very difficult question to answer, but since Web3 is so deeply entangled with the question of censorship, I just wanted to understand how you look at this problem.
Oof. I was expecting a softball at the end, but okay, yeah.
Sorry, not in this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, now it's a valid. I think it's a valid question. It's obviously a valid question. It's a very good question. So the way we think about it is, I mean, I think it's a cliche. You know, these are tools, and they could be used for good. They could be used for bad. Censorship resistance, I think, is something we want. I think we need protection from authoritarianism. I think we need as people, but with that, you know, comes the flip side of it being used to do things which are less than ideal. So we're very mindful of that, and we are, you know, ultimately the protocol will be tokenized at some point, and the governance of it will be moved to a DAO, to the community, the network that we run the nodes and find and use the creators themselves, those who hold, use it, derive value from it, and therefore can control it. And so obviously the DAO moving forward will have the responsibility of governing what should be built to be able to kind of fight the dark side of the internet and censorship resistant tools. I think, you know, with the latest Twitter files, I think we see how hard this is. And when humans are involved making decisions, they can get super messy, super fast. I think there's something good about the kind of black and white of ones and zeros and code. But then I think AI could be something that could be used to kind of pre-scan what's being uploaded and use kind of image recognition tools to identify if there's something like horrific being uploaded, something like that then is in accordance with the users of the protocol and the value that it's delivering. So I think those things always need to be kind of weighed, because ultimately, you know, if this protocol is delivering more harm than value, people, I think, probably can ultimately maybe stop using it, and so will kind of abandon it. And it's not to power a decentralized network is you need a lot of nodes running it, and time will tell with that. But at least right now, when we're building it, we're very aware of it. We are thinking about this a lot, and yeah, we're very, so we have kind of next kind of steps in the next quarter. We will be opening up this more kind of discussion towards the kind of the formation of the DAO. What does it mean? What would be the first topics? What are the main things that we keep in mind? So we'd be kind of opening that up, the discussion to the community later in the year. And so I think this is something that will be a very kind of interesting topic. How do we kind of tackle this as a community so that this useful tool can be used in the right way? Because I think ultimately we need censorship resistance as a kind of fundamental human right, so that, you know, we can't just get blacklisted and shut down. I think all views are valid, need to be heard, and then there's a curation layer on top that filters out the noise, the irrelevance. And I think that is something that maybe we didn't have in Web 2, that I think Web 3 will bring, which is this. We have in Web 2, we have this new thing called the creator economy, because Web 1 was read, then you have write, so you can have creator economy. With ownership, what we unlock is the curator economy. So when you own something, you're part of the upside of the creator, you layer on top, there's a filter that happens there. And so I think a lot of that will be something that will play, I think, with the protocols and what gets created, and so how things get curated and ultimately. But yeah, so but it's a hard question. You can hear that like the answer isn't easy, and don't have it.
You answered it so well, though. Wow. No, I like it, because I think you gave sort of the solution, which is that, well, it is a problem. At the same time, censorship resistance is a very desirable property. The middle ground probably is to say, okay, we need a governance layer, right? We need a curation layer that has governance inside, and the governance should, unlike in Web 2, not be done by some corporate overlords who have some random, maybe Puritan values like Disney and Apple, who pretend that humans don't have sexuality, right? So there is no porn on the Apple App Store because in Apple's world, people don't have sex, I think. And then there is, the value system of Elon Musk, who seems to be sort of flirting with right-wing populist views. And then there is the value system of the old Twitter staff, who were maybe leaning too far on the left. But in every case, they were sort of an unchecked, group of people doing sort of closed door, behind the door decisions about censorship. And I think what you said so well is how in Web3, through ownership, this is going to be organized differently, where I think a DAO is really the solution to say, okay, this is the network, we are the stakeholders, and we want that kind of stuff in our network, right? And I suppose that is Darkblock open source? Is the technology fully open source, or at some point, right? Because
at some point it will be fully. Now it's like 90%. There's still, some secret sauce as we kind of progressively move towards decentralization. So, but ultimately it will be so.
Exactly right. So once you're open source, there will be probably the big Darkblock sort of network with the dominant use cases. But then if there is any fringe group of people who feel like they are being censored in this network, they can do a fork, right? They can run their own thing. And then if it's flat out illegal, it's a job for the authorities to prosecute them and put them behind bars, right? But I think this is a much more healthy way of dealing with plurality in society than the Web 2 model, which really puts too much responsibility in the hands of some corporate overlords who just cannot possibly reflect the diversity of opinions of their user base, I think.
Right? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a hard job, it's so yeah, that's where I'm optimistic. That's where I see glass half full, kind of bring it full circle. I feel like, we still need to figure out how DAOs should run, actually, but as an idea, I think it's brilliant. Like, I feel like every football club, like I'm a football fan, I support Arsenal, and like there was this turmoil a few years ago, like the Spotify owner was going to come in and buy it. I was like, oh, this should just be like, why is it the sports club? And I think this is a kind of pretty German idea. Is the fans own the club, and the DAO basically kind of governs it, and that would probably be kind of chaotic. So I think how DAOs actually run, how that governance model kind of works, needs to be figured out. But I think as a concept of governance, the ownership in it, those are the users, they should own it. Instead of some people in ivory towers who don't use it, they are somehow affecting everyone's experience. Doesn't make sense to me.
Man, that was a perfect full circle that you just did. That makes me very happy. And also, you gave me this idea of DAOs buying football clubs. That is such a great idea, man. I'm blown away. This is so good. Why haven't we seen this yet?
I feel like Barcelona is to some extent like that. It's kind of a fan-owned club. And then you get these they do these elections, they elect the president or something like that, who can then runs the show for a few years, and I think that's a good model. Like, I think the fan-owned model is it makes sense to me as a sports fan of a club and as a user of a network,
Cool. Darri, this was a wonderful conversation. I had so much fun and I learned a lot about Darkblock and you as a person. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you, Florian.